Neon Night Circus by the Horror Hobbyists. What is your name? Jean. It was a tradition of sorts. Every year on Halloween, we'd attend the carnival. I thought we'd grow out of it, but even now... Come on, hurry up! They're letting people in. My friends both rushed, kind of shoving me like giddy children trying to be first in line. The Midnight Circus. Every fall, the carnival came to town, and every Halloween, their circus put up a special show. Gone were the bright balloon animals and smiling clowns. The tent was filled with carnies in masks, and everything had been touched up with blood instead of glitter. The show didn't take itself too seriously, which was probably part of the fun. We took our seats, looking up at the stage, watching as the ringleader called people in. Beside him stood a much taller man with dark eyes. I found myself staring at him, and suddenly our eyes locked. I looked away, laughing nervously, trying to listen into the conversation with my friends. But yeah, anyway, my boss is a total nutcase. Their voices faded away again, like I couldn't concentrate, still thinking about that guy. I was sure I was overreacting, but something about his eyes. He gave me the creeps. I found myself feeling sick, anxious. My stomach was churning, and I was breaking out into a cold sweat. Why? It felt like his eyes. I looked up and inaudibly gasped. The man was still staring at me, eyes piercing through me. His mouth pulled at one edge into the smallest of smirks. Hey, what's your issue? One of my friends looked at me. I hadn't realized how loud I'd been. The other waved their hand in front of my face and snapped to attention, turning to them. Say nothing. I opened my mouth to speak and then promptly shut it. I looked at my lap and shrugged. I could feel their eyes on me now, too, but neither of them pushed or pried. I didn't even know what to say. If I told them what was going on, they'd call me dramatic. I played it off, they'd probably know I was lying. If I played it off, they'd probably know I was lying. I was awkward, and silence just suited me better. Okay? I looked up, and they were both looking at each other, like they were trying not to laugh, but I still knew. I was starting to remember why we weren't on great terms. I remember why I wasn't invited on weekends anymore. I wondered if this year would be the last year they'd invite me along for this too. I could feel myself getting in my own head again, the sound of those around me fading. The lights were getting darker. The show was going to start. Still though, I couldn't focus my attention back in. Even as I heard screams and laughter and cheers, everything stayed blurry. Everything but him. People moved around the stage. The ringleader's voice echoed. He sounded young, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. The illusionist did not move as everyone else moved around him. He stayed still, watching me with those hollow, dark eyes and that smile that made my stomach flip. I couldn't tell if time had slowed or sped up. How long were we staring at each other? Then suddenly, a light. A bright spotlight that brought me back to reality. Everything that was loud was hushing and quiet. Eyes were on me, not the illusionists. "Thank you for volunteering." The ringleader smiled big, holding his megaphone as soon as the eyes I felt were my friends. The crowds, everyone. Realization crept in, and suddenly the illusionist was in front of me. That smirk was a wider grin now, those dark eyes full of something that to haunt my nightmares. He held out his hand. "Yes, thank you for volunteering." Take his hand. It felt like pressure was building up from each side. The audience was staring at me. My friends were staring at me. He was staring at me. Shaking, I set my hand in his and let him stand me up and guide me to the center stage. No words left me as I stood there silently, still, almost like I was in shock. I looked out over the crowd, and again, their faces started to warp and twist, like the fog was taking over my brain. I looked at the illusionist and watched his mouth move, but the sound didn't carry. I felt like I was going to pass out, dizziness brimming. And then suddenly, everything was silent again, and I could hear nothing but the illusionist. "Have fun." And then my world went black. My eyes opened and my head spun. It took me a minute to realize where I was. I was in the circus tent, but there wasn't a crowd anymore. Had my friends gone home? Had everyone gone home? I sat up, looking around, trying to piece together anything that had happened. "Well, well, look who's finally woken up." That voice. Everything flooded back to me suddenly, and I was on my feet looking around. "Where are you?" The circus tent wasn't very big. There wasn't anywhere to hide, and the illusionist's voice felt so close, it could have been inside my head. Maybe it was in my head. "Where am I?" My voice was more meek than what I wanted it to be, and it got an uproar of laughter from the voice. "Where are you? That is the question, Nothing seems to be out of place, so why would you ask that?" I could hear the smile in his voice as I looked around frantically. The air felt heavier. The lights felt discolored. It didn't feel real. This didn't feel real. "Well, since you're so forward, I'll just be honest. You're still in the circus, still center stage in front of everyone. Your body is, at least. Mentally, however, you've entered my illusion." I reached down to touch the stage, and it wibbled like jello, the ripples nearly making me lose my balance. Time doesn't move here. I've kept people inside in their own heads for weeks, months. Maybe one day I'll keep someone for years, torturing and tormenting, slowly driving them crazy. Would you like to be here for years? I covered my ears, and that low laughter shook my skull again. "You can't escape me here. It might be your mind, but it's my illusion. I control it, which means I control you." I shook my head over and over again. This is my version of our circus. The things in here, they're special to me. You seem like someone who spends a lot of time in their own head, so at least you'll feel at home. No, no, no. Let me out! I screamed, balling my hands into fists, looking around. It was just a circus tent. I couldn't get out. I could run out and leave this carnival and run home and forget everything. It doesn't work that way. The illusionist seemed to respond to my thoughts. I jolted, again looking around frantically, as if I'd seen him at any point. There is a way out, but it's not outside of the carnival. The illusion has an end, and if you get to the edges of it, you won't escape and run home. You'll die. I felt my blood run cold. And I really can't have that happening. It's so much extra work dealing with an empty vessel. The illusionist's voice drifted off like he was speaking to himself now instead of me. It gave me a moment to come to my grips with my new and sudden reality. There is a way out. There is a way out. I just had to figure it out. Ah, yes, well, I'll give you a gift. A friend. A guide. This sort of thing gets boring when people wander aimlessly for hours and hours. So take the mime. You'll need them. I turned around, nearly jumping out of my skin as I realized there was someone else in there. The mime looked up with its wide eyes, waving. It looked like they were smiling, but I almost couldn't tell. The mime set something down. It was bright green and fluffy. I looked at the mime and then at me. A rabbit. A bright green rabbit. Before I could say anything in disbelief, it hopped off to some part of the other tent. Go on then, have fun. The illusionist's words snapped me back to attention. Have fun. That echoed in my head again as I took in my surroundings. Have fun? There was nothing fun about this, but complaining didn't help. I needed to escape. Tried to talk to the mime. I looked at the mime. All things considered, they looked friendly. But were they real? Were they actually a cognizant person, or were they just some kind of puppet on a string that the illusionist was controlling? He said that this place was full of things that were dear to him, so maybe the mime was someone once. I looked at them, and they blinked their wide eyes, tilting their heads, still smiling. Hi. I realized even in life or death situation in a brain carnival, I would still be socially awkward and unsure how to talk to people. The mime didn't seem to mind that at all though. They just smiled more clearly and waved with both their hands. Do you know how to escape? They nodded and gestured for me to come towards them. I followed after them and they picked up what looked like a rather large, ornate, golden frame. I looked at it and touched it, realizing it wasn't a picture frame, but a mirror. A broken mirror. One that might have been in a funhouse or the like. My eyebrows furrowed and I looked back to the mime. I can escape with this? They nodded and I looked over it. I wasn't sure how this was going to help me, but I stood it up, looking at it closely. The mime took both of their hands and started pressing against the frame, like they were interlocking puzzle pieces. I wasn't really great at charades, but I could kind of see what I was thinking might have been the answer. I have to piece this mirror back together? The mime's eyes lit up in absolute delight, and they threw their hands up like they were astounded and thrilled that I'd figured it out from their pantomiming. There are 4 more pieces for you to find. The illusionist spoke suddenly, his voice echoing through the entire tent. I'd recommend going to the ticket booth to get a map. There's really only so many places you can go, but it speeds things up. I looked at the mime and they nodded, heading to the tent flaps and stepping out, keeping the flap open for me. I thanked them and got my first look outside of the tent. All in all, it looked mostly the same. The lights were brighter maybe, and my sightline in a distance seemed to warp. But it was still the carnival. The mime looked at me and gestured with a wave, pointing out towards where I knew the entrance had been before. Now, I could see it was all blocked off with trees, but the ticket booth still stood like it was waiting for people to come in. The mime started off, expecting me to follow. They were my guide after all. Follow mime. I followed after the mime, staying close beside them. We walked in silence, but even still, there was a spring in their step. They seemed happy, even given the circumstances. They hummed, walking like they were dancing. We came up to the ticket booth, and the mime clicked the intercom button, like they were waiting for someone to come up. I walked behind him and looked. There weren't any maps or informational booklets out or anything. They clicked the button again, but no one appeared. I looked through the glass and could see the maps were stacked in the booth. Hello? Anyone here? I called out to no one. I sighed. The mime sighed. Someone else sighed. I looked up and looked around. Hello? The mime and I looked at each other. That wasn't you, right? They shook their head. We both started to look around. Again, I heard a big sigh, like someone sucked in all the air they could and very dramatically sighed. The mime looked around at the side of the ticket booth and waved me over. There, beside the ticket booth, sat a patch of mostly dead flowers, and beside them, the very sad clown with the watering can. She sighed again, deeper than ever. Hello? The clown didn't look up at me, but her body turns toward me. She looked feeble and, well, sad. Hey, my friend and I are trying to get a map. Do you have any? I winced as she sighed again. Without a word, she lumbered to the ticket booth and opened the staff door, picking up a pamphlet. She handed it off to the mime. Are you here about the mirror pieces? She asked. Even her voice sounded like a kicked puppy. Yeah, actually, do you know where we can find them? Another sigh. She really made it feel like my existence was pain. Asked if she's okay. Are you okay? Me? She looked up with something like surprise in her features. I'm a sad clown, so I'm as okay as I can be. She sighed again and picked one off the petals from her hat. I just wish my flowers would grow, but maybe in another life. Sigh. If you want to get any part of the mirror, you have to earn it with skill or luck. Usually, like a prize. She wandered past the mime and I, heading back to her flowers without a word. Don't mind her, she's always like that. I looked up thinking that the mime had suddenly tapped into telepathy, but they looked as surprised as I was. Down here. We both looked down. To my surprise, there was that strange bright green rabbit from the circus tent. I stared really hard at the rabbit for a moment just before accepting what was happening. Arguing with the absurdity of the illusion would be fruitless. I was hoping she'd be able to point us in a better direction. The map was a start, I suppose. The rabbit seemed surprised by the answer. She definitely pointed you to the right direction. Just tap into your critical thinking skills. The rabbit didn't give me time to answer. She hopped away, disappearing into the darkness. I looked at the mime and they shrugged, opening up the pamphlet of the map and started to walk back towards the circus tent. I followed them, thinking about everything the clown has said. Like a prize. The mirror pieces were like prizes. Something I could win or earn, either with skill or luck or some combination. Without a word, I plucked the map out from the mime's hands, looking at it. Midway. Of course. This was a carnival, and carnival had games. What other way would you get anything from a place like this? I looked at the map and then looked towards the split in the path that went around the big top tent at the center of the carnival. Well, alright then, mime. Which way do you want to go? I looked at them. The mime waved their hands in front of themselves like they couldn't possibly choose. I breathed a sigh. Alright, let's go this way. Midway left. I led the mime around the left side of the tent and we came up to a couple booths. One had a pool in the middle of it with tons of ducks. The other was an entire wall of brightly colored balloons. I stepped up to the counter, looking at all the cute balloon animals. That's kinda messed up. The mime tilted their head and looked at me. I laughed, gesturing to the balloon animals. It's like they're here to watch their family die or something. The mime kind of snorted, like they wanted to laugh. They covered their mouth and I grinned. It's a balloon pop balloon world out there. The voice was an unfamiliar one. It almost sounded like someone had sucked in too much helium. I looked around, wondering if I'd see a carny or a clown, or someone running this game. Down here! I looked down. One of the balloon animals started to move towards me in a semi-floating gallop of sorts. I was becoming okay with the weird things way too quickly for my own liking. You wanna play? The balloon animal's face turned towards me and I looked at the mime, who gave me a big smile and thumbs up. Yes, I do. The balloon animal pushed a couple of darts towards me with its nose. See what you can pop and I'll let you take anything you want. I looked around and saw it there, a shard of mirror laying flat against the counter of prizes. Is that something I can take? The balloon animal nodded. Click to throw a dart. I tossed the darts and landed mostly in and on the balloons. The little pop sound echoing through the small stall. The balloon animal's little nose blew like a horn. Winner, winner. Go ahead and take whatever you want. I reached out and grabbed the mirror piece, looking it over. The mime offered their hand out and I handed it off. Thanks. Alright, well, next game then. The mime nodded and pointed to the duck pool. I waved goodbye to the balloon animal and made my way down to the very next game. full of ducks bobbed back and forth. Rings sat up on the top of the counter. And once again, towards the back, I could see a mirror piece. What runs this? Don't tell me... a rubber duck? I looked at the mime and they covered their mouth, shoulders shaking with laughter. Was that supposed to be a joke? There, at the center of the ring toss, was a large rubber duck, who was of course talking. Yep, at this point I was expecting it. Hello? I'd like to win that piece of mirror. I pointed to the mirror piece and the duck made a squeaky sound.
Alright, go ahead and try to ring some ducks. But be careful. If you don't do well, you must be appeased.
The duck's eyes reflected nothing, but there was something in its voice that told me that I should be afraid. It was a little hard to be scared when a giant rubber ducky was talking to me though. He must be appeased? I mouthed the words to the mime who just shrugged, picking up a ring and to look at it. I picked up the rest of the rings and looked around, trying to figure out which ducks to toss to. Click to throw ring. I threw the rings and easily caught a couple of ducks around their heads. I was kind of surprised how not rigged the fair games felt. I had almost expected the rings to be small or something, but they landed perfectly around the ducks. I looked at the mime who was still holding the last ring. Let them throw it. You wanna throw the last one? I smiled at the mime and they nodded, tossing the ring. It caught one of the ducks around the neck. I high-fived them. Nice job! I looked at their big rubber duck expectantly, watching as it sat there with those big eyes.
He is appeased.
I looked at the mime with arched eyebrows, and we both just shrugged.
You may take your mirror piece and go.
And we did just that. The mime picked it up off the counter and stashed it in with the other one, nodding to me. Well, alright, we got 2 pieces. We're halfway there. Should we head over to the other side of Midway? I looked back at the mime. A low rumbling sound suddenly made the mime tilt their head. I looked around. Was that thunder? And then again, the mime reached out and poked my stomach. It wasn't thunder, it was me. I was hungry. I'd been so busy running around that I hadn't realized it, but now I was starving. Uh-oh. I wasn't even sure that I could eat, but without food, I could feel myself getting a little dizzy and weak. It was even hard to think. I couldn't believe how overcome I was. The mime got my attention and gestured for me to follow. I nodded to let them take me by the wrist, pull me towards the concessions. It was a small set of tents with no food smell. And no food smell came from them. There was no overwhelming grease smell, no fried food smell, grill smell, nothing. If anything, the air was almost perfumed, like something sweet. We walked up to the counter and I looked around. Hello? I had to wonder if everything I'd seen would have been running the concessions, and what would they be cooking? I didn't have to wait long for my answer. Move. Out of my way, someone's here. Shush, come on. 3 tiny voices all bubbled up from behind some concession counters. I peered over, beholding the weirdest sight of the night. 3 gummy bears, roughly the size of actual teddy bears, jumped out to the counter. Hello! All 3 gummy bears cheered in unison. Welcome to the concessions. What can I get you? The pink one bounced in excitement. We have anything you could ever want. The mint one bounced as well. Cupcakes, marshmallows, candy, what you desire. The white one looked at me expectantly. Well, I think it was looking at me. I looked at the mime who nodded, ushering me to choose. Candies. Could I have some candy? I looked over. The pink gummy bear leapt into action, bouncing over to one of the counters. Of course you can. We got every kind of candy you can think of. I made my way over to the counter and watched them as they started to pull out bags and bags of candies, noticeably mostly gummies. Gummy sharks, peach rings, frogs, rainbows and rainbows of colors and shapes, and even teeny tiny gummy bears. So, you guys keep a lot of gummies? Yep, they're my favorite. The pink gummy bear scattered a couple of bags towards me. I couldn't bring myself to pick the gummy bears, so I grabbed whatever the next bag was. So, how did you find yourself here? The pink gummy bear crawled up close to me, watching as I ate the couple of gummies. My mime friend over there noticed my stomach rumbling. Oh, no, I mean in the illusion. The illusion. The carnival. Why was I here, really? I'm not sure. Maybe I made that magician guy mad? Was it the staring? Could have been the staring. The pink gummy bear looked at me like it was also trying to figure out what I did to get here. My plan is just to get the mirror and put it back together to get back to the reality. It wouldn't be much longer. A couple more games and I'd be set. The pink gummy bear sat a little closer to me, eating one of the tiny gummy bears itself. I can tell you where the other piece is. Huh? I looked at the pink gummy bear. It looked around like it was making sure no one was listening and then spoke again. It goes around, spinny, shiny. The pink gummy bear held out a couple of little gummy bears to me. For the road. You should get going. Despite my morals, I took the tiny gummy bears and nodded, looking at the mime. I flagged their attention and they nodded, following me in ways away from the concession. I repeated what the gummy bear had said. It goes around, spinny, shiny. My eyebrows furrowed. The mime clapped their hands together and pulled out a map they'd gotten earlier, showing it to me. There, towards the back of the park, I saw them. It goes around? A Ferris wheel? Spinny. The teacups? Shiny. The carousel? The rides of the park. There had to be a mirror piece at one of them. I looked at the mime as if asking for an answer, but they looked as unsure as I was. So it was up to me to pick which way we were going next. The mime and I started to make our way towards the back of the carnival, and as we went, I noticed the lights and started to get more dim. The bright fluorescent lights that peppered the concessions are midway were no more. Now, the entire park had an eerie, almost pink overtone. Strange, shapeless shadows started to fade into the corners of my vision. Bright eyes peered at us, their forms became more and more solid as the deeper we went. The mime gently took my wrist, staying close as I decided which way we would go. To the Ferris wheel. Something about the Ferris wheel made me think that it had to be what the gummy bear was talking about. It was a staple of the carnival and I could see across the entire fairground. As I walked along, the mime found myself seeing more and more of those strange, shapeless things. So what are those things? I gestured to the shadow figures that were roaming around and the mime tilted their head. It looked like they wanted to come up with an answer for me, but their eyebrows knit together and they just shrugged. I thought for a moment, watching the way the shadows bumbled and wandered along. A strange thought found its way in front of my mind. If I was trapped in here, couldn't anyone else be too? The way they all seemed to be searching made me wonder. Mime, are they people? Real people like me? The mime rubbed the back of their neck, and I could tell there was nothing they wanted to tell me, but they just couldn't. The mime rubbed the back of their neck, and I could tell there was something they wanted me to tell me, but they just couldn't. I could see the answer in their eyes though. They were. The shadows moved like ink blots, queuing up at the front of the Ferris wheel. The wheel itself seemed to be in constant motion, slowly rotating. Towards the front of the line, I could see the shadows stepping on and off, the carriages phasing in and out. A sudden and familiar feeling started to creep up on me. It was the feeling of eyes on me. Something was watching me. As the line moved and we crept closer and closer to the wheel, the feeling got stronger and stronger. I looked around and could see every shadow was looking right at me. I gripped onto the mime and they looked at me too. They tugged me, not towards the Ferris wheel but away. I stopped, standing firm looking at them. We have to find the mirror piece. We have to get on this ride. The mime looked over their shoulder, like they weren't worried about the shadows watching us but someone else. The mime looked back to me again, their eyes sharp and serious. They slowly shook their heads no and tugged me again. Listen. I looked into the mime's eyes. There was something in them that told me that I needed to listen. I let them take my hand and relief washed over them. Without waiting a moment longer, we cut out of the line. At first, it just felt like we were walking fast, but when we were moving faster and faster, and then we were running, full-on sprinting away from the Ferris wheel. I could feel them, the slow, lethargic shadows, right behind us, chasing us. They had gone from bumbling apparitions to speeding demons on our heels. We were tripping over our own 2 feet as we stumbled away from the rides, not looking back to see if we had outran them or not. The path ahead of us started to narrow and close in. Trees flanked our sides and we finally came to a halt, catching our breaths. I looked behind us and saw no sign of the sickly pink lights or those neon eyes. I looked forward and saw something new. There, amongst the trees, in a small clearing we'd found ourselves in, was a stage. Upon it, a large rickety wheel reflecting the stars shaped lights against its shiny facade. Wait, I stared at it. It goes around, spinny, shiny, An old-fashioned prize wheel, and there, no one of on one of the wedges I saw it. An intricate image of a mirror. "Welcome to the Wheel of Wonder!" A familiar voice shouted from behind the wheel. There were sounds of fumbling and scuffling, and then there they were. The gummy bears. All three of the gummy bears stumbled out from behind the wheel and looked at them in disbelief. They stood stacked on top of one another, wearing what I could only consider a disguise. I looked at the mime and I couldn't tell if they were as confused as I was or if they were just amused. After everything with the shadows, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't relieved to see the bears. "What are you guys doing?" I looked over them and they cleared their throats. I don't know who these guys are, but I am the Great Wonderstash, keeper of the Wheel of Wonder. I laughed. After everything that had happened, I deserved a good laugh. My exhaustion and terror mixed with an overwhelming need to scream or cry just made me laugh. I must have been going hysterical at this point. The Great Wonderstash, as the gummy bears chose to be known as, moved to stand beside the wheel. "Step right up. Anyone can spin the Wheel of Wonder once a day. Who knows? Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get a paintbrush." I looked at the mime who just shrugged, looking as confused and humored as I was. This was ridiculous. But at this point, I was at the mercy of the bears. I stepped up beside the wheel and took a hold of it, spinning it with the might of all that hysterical adrenaline pent up inside of me. I stepped up beside the wheel and took a hold of it, spinning it with the might of all the hysterical adrenaline pent up inside of me. I watched the wheel spin around, hoping it would land on the mirror. The gummy bears swayed like they might fall at any minute as well as we watched the wheel, waiting for it to stop. It started to slow and I felt my nerves spiking. The wheel stopped on a purple gift box. The Great Wonderstash wobbled to the back of the wheel, pulling out what looked like a stuffed animal of some strange animal. Maybe it was a slug? I couldn't tell, but they held it out for me. "Ding ding ding! You're a winner!" I don't want this. I don't need this. The delirious happiness wore off quickly. The gummy bears all tilted their heads, looking at me as if they were confused. "Of course you don't need it. It's a carnival." They were just fun little prizes. The gummy bears' expressions weren't capable of changing, but they sounded like they wanted to cheer me up. I shook my head. "No, I need the mirror piece. I have to get the mirror piece. I need to get out of here. I have to go home." I could feel everything culminating into emotional chaos. I was spiraling. No amount of carnival games or sugar or stupid little mustache would make this any better. The mirror piece? The mint gummy bear spoke separately from the group.
Well, why didn't you just say so?
The gummy bears started to shuffle them back towards the Wonder Wheel. The tower of gummy bears collapsed and they rifled through their things. The pink gummy bear stood tall, holding the third mirror piece. I did say so. Part of me wanted to be angry, but they had it the whole time and sent me on this stupid goose chase. But more of me was just relieved to have another piece. The pink gummy bear handed it off to me without a fight. "There, silly." Nothing to be sad about. Cheer up! You're at the carnival! I rubbed my face and handed the mime the mirror piece. Just breathe. I tried to tell myself I had to stay calm. This was almost over. Thank you. I looked at the gummy bears and their stupid mustaches. The mime pulled out their map and held it up to me, tapping the very last place we needed to check. The place was so obvious, we probably should have started there. I took their wrist and led them even further and deeper down the path that was getting darker and darker. There, far past the Wonder Wheel, in a very dark clearing, stood the House of Mirrors. It was a typical mirror maze, but I'd always hated those damn things. I hated the feeling of being watched. The idea of seeing a reflection that wasn't my own gave me nightmares. But it was the last place, which meant it was the last piece. We came up to the boxy building and it looked like it was metal and plywood. There, in front of the entryway, was the little neon rabbit. She twitched her nose and looked up. "You made it!" She almost sounded relieved. I nodded, looking into the maze at the collection of my own reflection. I hated that. I looked back down at the rabbit. "The last piece is at the center of the maze. Get it and we'll meet you back to the tent." We? The blue lights of the maze thumbed like they were slowly calling me in. The rabbit and the mime and then back to me. The rabbit looked at the mime and then back to me. "Mime? They can't go inside in there. None of us can." In the maw of the many mirrors I saw beside my reflection was a very warped and disguised stain of sorts where the mime stood, and something scratched the twitching where the rabbit was. "It isn't safe for us. The mirror are gateways, and they're too close to reality. You have to go alone." The mime hugged me suddenly, a chill going down my back as I thought about the reflection and what that meant the reality was. "We'll meet you back at the tent," the rabbit repeated, hopping off. The mime pulled back and waved to me. They looked hopeful but worried. I watched them walk away, disappearing along the dark tree-lined path. I looked back into the mirror maze, took a deep breath and headed inside. I tried to look at my feet as I shuffled through the claustrophobic hallways. Mirror and glass both lined in a different twists and turns, making it easier to bump into things. Grand chandeliers hang from the ceilings, that dull blue light coming from them. No other light found its way in. As I got further away from the entry, a rumbling sound started. This time, I knew it wasn't my stomach. The loud sound of rain began pelting the top of the roof, the blue lights flickering and the chandelier swaying as the storm outside kicked up from seemingly nowhere. The smell of petrichor poured in behind me. Amidst all of the heavy pattering, though, I heard something else. Another sort of clicking sound, like something tapping on glass. I looked back just in time to see the tail end of a giant centipede and its body and legs crawling in from the rain up the walls of the Hall of Mirrors. It was in here with me, and it was massive. Its body was easily the size of a person, and though I hadn't seen it at all, it had to be twice as long. I sped up, running through the maze quicker. The sound of those sharp, pointed feet moving along the glass echoing with the rain barreling down outside. I smacked face first into a mirror and looked to my left and right. The corridor split here, and if I make the wrong choice and had to turn back, I risked running into the centipede. Right. I kept running, the uncomfortable tapping sound closing in. Now there was another sound, almost like a rattling, like gas escaping, hissing. The centipede was gaining on me and I knew it. I looked back behind me and paled. I could see multiple segments of it through the different hallways. That or the mirror were playing tricks on me. I couldn't tell anymore. I went faster. Left. As I went in, I was bumping into less and less walls. I had it down to the best method I possibly could. The less I needed to backtrack, the better. I needed to stop looking behind me, and I needed to just focus on the maze. Left. I made the last turn down a corridor. The maze opened up into a smaller atrium of sorts. The darkness and rain swallowed the space, but at the head of the atrium I could see it. One of the mirrors, just like dozens of others I'd bumped into, only it was broken entirely. Only one piece remained and it was the perfect shape. It was the final mirror piece. I snatched it, looking around. I couldn't hear myself think anymore of the thundering downpour and my own heartbeat. I held the piece close to my chest and continued the maze running. Everything blurred. Nothing felt real. Maybe nothing was real anymore. But I got the piece. I got it. I burst out of the hall of mirrors, rain hitting me and instantly soaking me to the bone. I half expected to hear the centipede chasing after me, but nothing came out of the maze. Heat rose from the dirt as the rain splashed down into big puddles. I didn't care. I kept running, back through the dark trees of the forest, past the carnival rides, past the midway games. I ran all the way back around to the front of the circus tent. I didn't even bother catching my breath before I bolted inside. There, at the center of the tent, sat the mime. They had the mirror stood up and they were securing the pieces. Beside them, the neon rabbit looked up. Surprise came over her face. The mime jumped up, excited clear in their eyes. They threw their hands up in celebration and I ran back over, holding up the final piece. Well, go on, put it in. The rabbit got up on her hind legs, nose crinkling. The mime nodded in excitement, smiling big as I stepped forward. I placed the last piece of the mirror and the image warped and warbled, stretching my vision like a funhouse mirror. I took a step back from it, watching as the surface rippled like water. I did it! Disbelief echoed in my voice. I looked at the mime with my eyes big. I was smiling like crazy. We did it! I all but tackled the mime, hugging them tightly. Their shoulders shook like they were laughing, and they nodded, leaning back. Well, are you going in? The rabbit more or less broke up the moment and I took a breath. Finally, it was over. I nodded, looking into the mirror. My own reflection was starting to look strange, not just from the warp of the mirror, but it was like my form was changing. The rabbit seemed to notice it too. You've been here a little too long. You gotta go, and you gotta go now. I looked back and the mime gave me a thumbs up. I mouthed another thank you to them, feeling like an almost bittersweet heaviness in my chest as I gave a final goodbye and went through the mirror. The sensation was strange. So cold it felt wet, like thick fog that plunged me into darkness. Everything was dark and cold. I looked around expecting my eyes to adjust, but they never did. I stumbled for a moment before a bright light blinded me. I squinted, seeing a deep glowing red appearing in slits all along the void. Eyes, clusters and clusters of red, trembling eyes. So, are you proud of all you've done? Do you feel accomplished? The voice seemed to echo in the room the darkness of the room. The illusionist took shape in front of me and took a step back. Don't be afraid now. I've had ample time to do anything I could ever want from you. You've seen my ability. Do you really think if I wanted to hurt you and step back would save you? I gritted my teeth. Let me go! I want all your stupid games, so let me go! Unease and panic filled me. Who was to say he really would let me go? The mirror that was supposed to lead me back to reality led me here. Was this all just some elaborate psychological torture? To tangle hope in front of me and then do this? Oh, won't you calm down? We're having fun! I am not having fun! I screamed. I beg to differ. You had your moments. He waved a hand, speaking nonchalantly, grinning like he was so tickled with himself at what he'd done. I had so many questions burning in my head, but I didn't care about the answers anymore. I just wanted to go home. The illusionist seemed to notice this, and that smirk only grew. You could stay if you wanted. Reality is awful, truly. Wouldn't you agree? What waits for you outside this mirror? Friends who don't even like you? Family who doesn't understand you? My expression must have turned. I could see it in his eyes. He felt like he was convincing me. Was he? If you want to stay here with us, I would let you, you know? The illusionist said that like he was offering me some kind of life of luxury, like I hadn't just gone through a living hell. After everything I just went through to get out of here, what makes you think After everything I just went through to get out of here, what makes you think I'd stay? That familiar unsettled fear rose inside of me again. He could completely control and warp my perception. He could make me say yes. He could make me think I wanted to say yes. Did I want to say yes? I gripped my head, trying to reel myself back in. I'd been through so much. I felt so fragile. His face was in front of mine, a wild expression reflecting in his eyes now. Well then, I'll just ask you directly. Will you stay? No. What? No! No! I stepped away again. The illusionist seemed surprised, like he honestly expected me to say yes and stay here. Why would I do that? Shame. Here I was thinking you'd stay. He chuckled under his breath and I sneered. Let me go, I demanded again. The illusionist looked like he was very quickly becoming bored with me, and with his back and forth, it was like he realized he wasn't going to get what he wanted. Fine. You're right. You did what you were tasked with. You did what you were tasked with. So go. The illusionist waved his hand, and the rippling surface of a mirror appeared again. I looked at it. It was the same mirror I just come through, and in the reflection, I could make out the same familiar interior of that damn circus tent. Do you think I'm stupid? What? The illusionist arched his brows. I pointed at the mirror. That's the mirror I put together. The mirror I just walked through. If I go through it again, I'll just come out the other side If I go through it again, I'll come out the other side back into the circus tent. He stared at me for a moment, assessing how to respond to me. Dear, my illusions do whatever I want. I told you to put the mirror together and you could escape through it. So go ahead and escape through it. You seem to forget that you were in a circus tent to begin with, watching our show, weren't you? So of course, that's what's on the other side. It's reality, not my illusion. The entire ordeal had made me paranoid. What reason did I have to trust him? There were so many of those lost souls wandering in the fairgrounds. Who was to say if I went through the mirror, I wouldn't end up like them? Well, I looked at the mirror again and then back at him. Go through the mirror. I stared at him for a long time. I don't trust you. As you shouldn't. He chuckled under his breath, crossing his arms. He was grinning again, like my reaction pleased him. He stepped closer, breezing past me, gesturing to the mirror like it was an open doorway. After you. I really didn't trust him, but my only other option was this darkness, and I wasn't sure how long I would last here. I stepped up to the mirror and took a deep breath. That also seemed to make him laugh as he snorted under his breath. I glared at him. What? Nothing. I didn't say anything. He looked away and snorted again, not hiding it at all. I ignored him, pushing through the mirror. My eyes dilated and the bright lights of the big top burst into my vision. Sound came back, loud applause, laughter, balloons popping, chips and snack wrappers crunching. Everything was vibrant and loud. Reality. My sight line focused back in and there in front of me was the illusionist, still holding my hand as though he'd pulled me from the crowd. I yanked my hand away from him, looking at him in horror. For a moment, he looked surprised, and I thought he was going to pretend like nothing happened. He grinned though, not able to hide his amusement from my reaction. Everything I'd been through, everything I'd felt and experienced, it all culminated into this one single reaction I found myself unable to control. Ask him about the illusion. I looked the illusionist in the eyes, which seemed to startle him. I'd been quiet and idle at the start of our night. But after everything, it felt like I'd changed. Was I confident? Not particularly. But I was willing to ask for answers I deserved. Yeah, I was. I gripped him back, staring at him. How did you do that? My voice was a hushed whisper. We were standing center stage in the eyesight of hundreds of other people, but I didn't care. I wanted an answer. Amusement danced in the illusionist's eyes. He tilted his head, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. You would care to know? After all you've endured, you really want to subject yourself to more? Well, no, I hadn't said that. I wasn't offering to go through any triathlon of carnival games while avoiding life-threatening creatures again, but I was curious. That wasn't just hypnotism, that wasn't just an illusion, that was something else entirely. I pressed my lips together tight, considering what kind of answers I could really offer. I think I deserve to know. The illusionist gave me a wild sort of grin, all teeth, clearly thrilled to see my reaction. He looked around and focused back on me. Stay after the show. It'll be late, but if you want to know, I have nothing to lose. His eyebrows arched. He was sizing me up, wondering if I'd accept putting myself into that position. After everything, I figured I could handle it. Deal. I shook his hand and he let me go. The illusionist snapped his fingers and one of his assistants ran up to the side. She held an armful of hula hoops and boasted a bright green hair and some magenta eyes. My eyebrows furrowed and I looked around, searching for the faces of the clowns and performers, noticing another one in particular. Off to the side, talking animatedly to another carny with blue hair was a mime. They looked over their shoulder, like they could feel my eyes on them. They gave a big smile and waved aggressively before turning back to keep rambling. The hula hoops were suddenly pushed into my arms, pulling me away from my staring. The illusionist's voice boomed through the circus. He was picking his act back up like none of the hush-hush back and forth had ever happened. I'm going to hypnotize this patron into a master hula hooper. The crowd cheered, the light dimmed, and once again, I let the illusionist hypnotize me. Best end, I loved the circus. Lucky ending.